Okay, we are live here at the Heritage Foundation, Washington, D.C. The March for Life is happening. We are Heritage Explains Live, bringing it to you live. If you've been following it at all, you know what the March for Life is. This is where the pro-life movement, this is where conservatives, this is where people from all across the spectrum gather to celebrate the most cherished of our fundamental rights, the right to life.
You got it.
And we are marching for that today. We are joined by the big kahuna here at the Heritage Foundation. This is the guy, Dr. Kevin Roberts. This is your first time on Heritage Explains Live, in case you didn't know that, but you know.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And against your better judgment, you had me on, and maybe against my better judgment, I agreed to come.
You better do good, or we won't have you on again.
Oh, I know.
You know
Okay.
what I'm saying?
Really, the pressure is immense.
The pressure is on here because these folks here that are watching live on YouTube, Facebook, they're going to be submitting their questions. If you have them, again, this is a champion of the pro-life movement. He's been plugged in for decades. I mean,
yeah, but it makes me sound old, Tim. But that is true.
Yeah, well, you know, it's okay. And he was actually out there today, standing on the stage, fully a part of it, marching with pro-lifers, and we're gonna just get right into it. What was I'm just curious, the mood, the feel that you sensed out there?
Look, I mean it when I say it. There's no exaggeration or salesmanship about this. I was prepared for there to be great cheer. I always go, this is I think my 14th or 15th March for Life. I always come because I'm inspired by young people. You know, I'm a teacher at heart.
Yeah.
So I just really appreciate them. But today it was lights out optimistic.
Oh, wow.
And I think it's not just about the potential Supreme Court decision. I think it's because we know we're winning hearts and minds. And that's really the message I would convey to all of you who are tuning in.
It's so good. And folks, if you have questions for Dr. Roberts, just type them in. Or I can call you Kevin.
Please
right?
call me
Yeah,
Kevin.
I'll call him Kevin. If you have questions for Kevin, drop them in the chat. We have them coming in here. We'll get to them in due course. But I wanted to focus on hearts and minds.
Yeah.
You know, we are in a very, very tough town here. and it's hard
I figured
to
that out.
yeah, you're coming from Texas. And it's a hard thing to get things done here.
Yeah.
We have a big case that's coming up, which we'll get into, Dobbs. But I'm just curious, build a little bit more on what winning hearts and minds for life looks like.
Look, there's a lot riding on Roe versus Wade. We'll get into that. But the reason we're winning the pro-life issue is because about 15 years ago, our side decided that, you know, the world of politics, the world of D.C., to your point, the world of courtrooms, those are really important.
Yeah.
But the really important work is that people who are out here marching for babies, they're also marching for moms, and they're marching for dads. And they are people, I guarantee you, I'm looking at the screen there, and I was just with them. Every single one of the hundreds of thousands of those people who are here today marching would give the shirts off their back to an expectant mom facing a difficult decision. That's winning hearts and minds, right?
Yeah.
That's also what those of us in the Judeo-Christian tradition, for that matter, any organized religion in the world, would say is our obligation as people of faith.
Yeah. And it's funny, I learned, and by the way, folks, we've got a lot of people tuning in. Melissa is on Facebook. She's watching from Wyoming. She's
man.
on. This is great. We got
What
a
am I
crowd
about
back
to
here.
do?
Hey, kids, say hi to everybody. Go on out. Yeah, get there. Yeah, absolutely. They're warming up here. It's
There's the culture of life right there.
That's right. Yeah, there's like 17 degrees outside, and they want to come in, get a cup of coffee. Everything's great.
I just told them, I said, thanks for being here. They said, oh no, sir, thank you for having us. It's cold out there.
Oh, that's so good. Well, I wanted to say, I learned about pro-life when my family adopted.
Wow.
When my parents explained to me why we are doing this, why it's important to do this, because we need to fill in a gap. We need to ensure that babies have a home.
Yeah.
That life continues, that life does not end.
Yeah.
And that was my awakening. I'm just curious, just personally, when did you really become a champion, really become a passionate person on the pro-life movement?
Well, growing up in a part of the country in South Louisiana, which is extraordinarily pro-life, big families and real sort of intricate, extended families, it just wasn't anything you ever questioned. But I was in 8th grade when I took this political typology test. You know, I am a nerd.
Yeah,
of course. I'll make that part brief. But the point is, I took the test and I said, well, of course it makes sense that you would protect life in the womb.
Yeah.
But this is the key point. I recognized even as an 8th grader, maybe just always being kind of a people person, that there was a human side of that had to be difficult, although of course as a 13-year-old I didn't fully understand, right? And so it was when I was in college when I recognized, man, the pro-life movement's got it right in terms of the head, But we need to be persuading people by doing as much ministry for expectant moms facing that difficult decision. Increasingly now, as I think you're aware of, for dads who are obviously part of that equation. And because we've done that, we've begun to turn the tide. And man, that's what makes me proud. If we overturn Roe versus Wade, that's going to be awesome, and I'm going to be happy and proud. What makes me proud is to know that all of these pregnancy centers, all of these ministries for moms are out there. And that, for us as Americans, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it takes the focus off of Washington D.C. and
Exactly.
places it on. Yeah, absolutely.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Now you mentioned overturning Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
Now this is a different march this year because we have a case at the Supreme Court currently, Dobbs, which actually could overturn Roe v. Wade. Talk a little bit more about that. A little bit more about how Heritage has been involved there, and a little bit more. I don't like projecting and what do you think the Supreme Court's going to do, because we don't know what's going to happen. But what is potentially on the horizon for that?
Well, and I agree with you on the projecting.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say is that whatever the decision is, it's not just a turning point, it's a new book. It's not just a new chapter, it's a new book in this movement. So a very quick personal story that gets to the heart of this.
Yeah.
I started a school in Louisiana, John Paul Academy, if there are any of you tuning in, hello. And so we started taking a March for Life pilgrimage from South Louisiana up here in 2008. And there were several dozen of those students here today. And so I got to visit with them. And I said, look, whatever happens, I happen to think, to project just a little bit, that the court is going to at least partially overturn Roe versus Wade. Every decision then is at the state level. And so that is the first phase of the new book. It's the first chapter of the new book, where we now have to do this times 50, every state capital. And that's harder work than being focused just on overturning a Supreme Court decision, and that's taken half a century.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because those of us who are not experts within this issue, they hear overturning Roe v. Wade and they just think abortion's gone, it's over, it's done, no more. But there are a lot of states out there that have doubled down on their abortion laws. New York, I mean, we saw the Virginia debacle a couple years ago with Governor Northam talking about his,
which was really sinister.
It's extremely sinister, and I believe an election happened partially because of that.
That has got that aspect of that. The Virginia election has gotten less coverage, but I think you're right. And I should say the role Heritage is playing is that we are being very proactive, preparing for what I'm calling a post-Roe world. And with all of the other great pro-life organizations, that includes Heritage. I think we've got to think about how we can develop these new coalitions and partnerships to reflect the new challenge, which will be making sure that we pass pro-life legislation in every state.
We got a lot of people tuning in, watching. Claudius is on YouTube, watching from Salzburg, Austria.
Oh man,
that's great. I was skiing in Kitzbühel, which they're
you're such a world traveler.
Audience of one. We're an audience of one. Claudius, thank you for joining in. Natalie's on Facebook. It's time for Roe vs. Wade to be overturned and the laws rewritten to protect all lives affected. That's great. Susan's Louisiana. And let's see here. Alice on Facebook says, thanks for letting us know what is really happening around us. Alice, that is so great of you to say that. That's what we aim to do.
And can I hang on that point for a minute?
Go ahead, yes,
and
absolutely.
say, people often ask me, friends all over the country, what is it that Heritage does? I mean, y'all understand what we do in terms of public policy. We are your service organization. I like sometimes say behind enemy lines. Maybe I should be a little sweeter and say behind opponents' lines. But y'all are not in D.C. We are. We have that privilege and that burden. And so we are so grateful that you would tune into something like this and support what we're doing.
It is great. And as you can see, I mean, we got this place bumping right now. This is like the biggest party in D.C.
It is.
Considering that parties aren't really happening in D.C. right now because of COVID.
You'll like this. I got a call from someone out of state and they said, Kevin, the Heritage is the talk of the town because y'all are opened up. You're telling the mayor, just stay where you are. We got hundreds of pro-lifers here.
That's right.
And it's a little bit of a Texas spirit. Come and take it, baby.
Come and take it. I mean, well, hey, look, everybody is an invited guest here, and that's it.
That's exactly right.
This is where it's all happening. This is the life force of the life movement right here at the Heritage Foundation, joining with groups from all across the movement. Talk a little bit about that movement, how you see when we say the movement, a lot of people might not know what that means.
Yeah, that's true.
And so talk a little bit about all that's involved in the movement to overturn Roe and promote life.
Yeah, well, put simply, the pro-life movement is the association, and it's sort of a loose association, because conservative folks are kind of independently minded, of organizations, people, church groups across the faith spectrum who have decided that this is the cause of the age. And of course, there are other really important political issues, policy issues that they're concerned about, that we're concerned about. But it just sort of by definition, if we get this one wrong much longer, all of those others are just totally secondary. And so the role that Heritage plays is not to tell people what to do, but to facilitate conversations.
That's right.
And to bring people together. We have literally done that, to your point, by having all these folks. We haven't met a lot of these folks. They're friends of the movement who've been invited here. And so we encourage you, whether this day next year, if we're doing another March for Life, or any other event, to be part of it.
It's funny, I was just talking with a friend who's in town, and they've got 3 people who voted for Biden with them, marching in the movement right now. And then I think about this restaurant in DC, Busboys and Poets, who won't allow left-wing, pro-life people to gather there. And it's just a stark contrast to a positive energy, a positive, forward-looking movement versus keep it down. It's incredible.
That's a key point, and what I tell people who've not had the privilege to come to the March for Life is you ought to try to come once, because what you will walk away with is this encouragement. It's almost supernatural, if you will, from the young people. And it's not because they've been told this is what you need to say, this is what you need to chant, this is what you need to believe. They know it in their hearts.
One question from a Facebook viewer: how do I explain why life matters to my pro-choice friends? Kind of building on that.
Well, I would start with what usually our left of center pro-abortion friends are thinking, which is that is a mother's decision. It's her health care. And so start on their ground, because that's where they're going to be most responsive. And of course, you're going to go about this as a friend. It sounds like you're a wonderful person. And just explain for that mother that when you talk to women, as I have, scores of them who've had abortions, and not in any judgmental way as a guy, but just trying to understand, sometimes ministering to them, you understand the pain and the guilt that they feel after that, in the same way that any of us would make a bad decision. And the second thing is, if our left of center friends know we're not wagging a finger as sort of mad Christians about this, we want to help. And that maybe you can point them to getting to know a pregnancy center, and then they have firsthand experience with us at our best, where we're really trying to minister to those women. They will eventually get there on the intellectual part of abortion, because it simply makes no sense. It is taking a life. But we have to be really careful with the words we choose. We have to put smiles on our faces during a really difficult conversation, but most of all, remain friends. That is how we are going to take back this country. It's not going to be by being ugly and responding to the left with how they talk. It's going to be because we're smiling and we're pointing toward a real positive future, including on this issue.
That's great. And we just keep getting these questions in for Facebook. So if it's okay, just another one here. How have you seen the pro-life movement change over the last couple years? And what can we expect from the Heritage Foundation as we continue to build on our movement?
Well, I'll take the second question first and say what you can expect from the Heritage Foundation is, we've always been a pro-life organization. We've been a lot more explicit about that and involved in it the last few years, certainly under my leadership. And I hope to be around here a long time. We are an absolute central part of the pro-life movement, and so we're helping on legal briefs, we're helping on policy briefs, we're working at the state level, because we're assuming that there's going to be at least partial victory in Roe. But the big thing that's changed, and my son, who's 17 and he's here today, he's a big pro-lifer, he's been marching. He said, "Dad, that I remember when I came as a young guy, 11 or 12, and he said there were people who had all these pictures of abortions, which are gruesome, and they're pro-lifers, but they're not being persuasive. What's changed is that we're placing an emphasis, largely because of our March for Life leader, Jeannie Mancini, who's done a great job. We're placing an emphasis on women and men and the decisions they're making and ministering to them. And as we tell those stories, pro-lifers sound like people who care about people. Imagine that, which of course we've always been. But, sometimes some of us lead with the facts rather than with emotions. This is a totally emotional issue, and we've learned how to focus on that.
Well, I got to tell you, it's a really incredible thing to see you up here leading so quickly, moving to Washington within the last, I guess, couple weeks here.
Yeah, that's right.
Taking over at the Heritage Foundation. I hope I didn't, upset my boss today because there's some power here. But I will say this though, that I was worried about you today because you're out there in 17-degree weather marching, and I've heard that people who are follically challenged. Get brain freeze. So I'm glad you were able to put sentences together here.
Well, it's been great working with you, Tim.
Yeah, right. Okay,
Hope you enjoy the weekend.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
My biggest concern for you about my follicle challenge is whether you would be blinded by the glare.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, we did put makeup on that there to
right.
reduce the glare earlier. No, that's a joke. We didn't put makeup. It's all good.
Although sometimes we have to.
Sometimes we have to. That's great. Well, hey, I really appreciate Kevin, Dr.
Please,
Roberts.
Kevin.
Yeah, being with us today. It's a great
pleasure.
thing to have you here. And
Thanks
we're
for
going
you.
to have you on again.
And for all of you.
It's great. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for your questions. We're so grateful for you. Log on to the March for Life website. See some of the photos that have been taken today, some of the videos. It's very, very inspiring. As I said, the energy is incredible. We have the pulse. We have the momentum. And we are so excited to keep you updated as things happen. So from Heritage Explains Live, we'll see you again.